So let's begin. Welcome everyone to my panel. EJ's a flashy demonstration. Now, before we begin, I will say there are no flashing lights here, so don't worry about that. It's just a matter of the fact that we're using Adobe Flash for this demonstration. Now, I'll save some time for questions and everything later, so if you have any, feel free to ask them at the end. But let's start with a couple little things here. First and foremost, the version I'm using here is Flash CS6, although, yes, they've now well upgraded to other, Adobe itself has gone well and beyond this version into what they now call Animate. The same basic software, just different name because of conflicts with them trying to move, with the internet as a whole, trying to move away from Flash-based into HTML5. So let's begin without any further ado. Let's talk about animating in Adobe Flash. To start off with, we have our basic pony puppet. This is what we call what we're working with. Now, a pony puppet is devised of various things that Flash calls symbols. Now, it's kind of a bit disturbing to see there, but it's broken up like so. Each one of these pieces are symbols, like the legs, the mane, the piece of the mane on the what we call the neck, and her hat. And these symbols can be broken up even further into more symbols, a nested symbol system. The face, for instance, is composed of the eyes, the mouth, what we call the entire skull, things like that. Generally speaking, as a good rule of thumb when it comes to making a puppet, kind of disturbing to look at, isn't it, MrBen?
I'm just thinking more like she just blew up. Straight exploded.
But these can be nested in and worked with, and we'll show you that in this demonstration. So what is a symbol? Well, symbols are basically the way Flash reads things, and it can be broken up into three different types of symbols. We have our image symbol, which are basic, you can think still imagery. However, there is a lot more. Again, I'll be demonstrating this here in a moment when we get there, but the image symbols are basically just still images, although there are settings that can animate them, again, as I'll show you. Movie symbols, on the other hand, are kind of operate on their own way, their own timeline, we'll say. Like Luna's mane here, this is a good example of a movie symbol. I'm not touching anything, I'm not doing anything, and yet it's still animating. It's still working off of its own animation. And finally, we have button symbols. Now, in terms of animation itself, you're probably not going to see any button symbols, but this is a good one to go over nonetheless. Button symbols are, as their name implies, things that you can take a button to. You can press it, you can interact with it. If you've ever played a Flash game and it has something like a choose your own path, for instance, this is something that you would work with, a button symbol. And they can do various things, like boop Luna's nose, for instance. Now, before we begin, let's take a step back and let's look at Flash as a whole. What does it look like? What does it look like when we work with it? I'm sorry, I kind of have a bit of a cold, so forget the... I'm sorry about all the coughing. I'm sorry about all the stopping, but that's the story behind that. Let's take a look at Flash, the interface. Down here at the very bottom is our timeline. This is the part where we have all of where we work with everything, where we time it out, everything like that. Everything that you are ever going to work with has to be on some layer in Adobe Flash. Now, it looks like a lot. Like I've got a lot of symbols here. And let's just take a look at a scene here. Now, first and foremost, as I said, it does look like there are a lot of layers to it, but a lot of them are just scenery symbols. For instance, this one is just this whole collection of a tree. I just put it together in a file for this one tree up here. So a lot of it, the nice thing is if you know what you're looking for, it's easy to find. And even if you don't know what you're looking for, if you're smart about it, layering and labeling things makes it a heck of a lot easier to find. Now, we're going to focus here on AJ. I want to show you guys a couple things here before we get going. In this nested layer that is Applejack, our animation is going to look something like this. You probably already saw it. We're going to show her waving. I picked this scene from, what was the episode? Dragon Quest, when they're all waving goodbye to Spike. So this was the inspiration behind it. I wanted something simple and easy, but at the same time something a little more flashy than, say, just them throwing a ball or something. What we're going to do here, we're going to recreate this. Now, we're only going to recreate one frame because to give you an idea of how long this takes, in a good session, it takes me about 4 months to make 2 minutes worth of animation. And a lot of that just comes from making things ex nihilo. So scenery, characters, and then animating those characters, getting the voice actresses and voice actors together. Some of them are a lot better than others when it comes to what's the word? Punctuality, that's the word. And I'm not going to name names, of course, but some are nice about it. Some you got to get on their case. Anyway, all of that put together takes about, again, in a good time, about 4 months to do. And especially if your real life is kind of an issue, then then it gets longer and more complicated. And speaking of which, the complexity of the animation. Do I have a lot of scenes? Do I have only one scene? Like maybe I'm just recreating a comic. All of these things are going to affect time. But even in terms of the animation itself, this whole thing, I had only about a month to work with. When I got I'll tell this story because it's a good one. So I subscribed to or follow MLP MSP on Twitter. And about a month ago, I see on their Twitch page, they're saying, hey, if you want to get your panels in now, you got to get it now before midnight. And I was thinking at the time, I'm not that well known. Who wants to see a Flash animation? But at the same time, I thought, well, darn it, it would be a pretty unique thing to share. So, as a shot in the dark, I threw it out there and said, all right, let's see what happens. About not too long later, they said, hey, you're accepted. Not on reservation, not nothing, just you're accepted. So it's like, well, fantastic, but at the same time, oh boy, because what am I going to do? So I was looking for some simple animations, and I decided, like I said, on the Dragon Quest one. Now, how it looks, something worth looking at, lays in this bit right here. I'm showing you this little trick just to kind of give you an idea of how layering works. Now, here's AJ's hoof. This is the usual layer that I have it on. 9 times out of 10, I don't have to worry too much about it. But look at where this is compared to the head. Right here. In order to work with the hoof down here, I have to move the hoof to a much higher layer so that when she's going to wave in front of her head, it doesn't appear behind it. This is what it looks like if you don't move it. It just looks silly, right? Maybe she is. So it's just this short little loop that we'll do here on copy AJ. Now, usually when I start off with, a good reference is a good thing to have, be it from the show, from other shows, YouTubers showing you whatnot, whatever the case. Don't ever be afraid to use references. I'm going to stress that. If you're doing this, still art, whatever, don't ever be afraid to use references. Now, I currently have copy AJ set to a still. And here is old copy AJ. And if we look at her, you'll notice she's missing a frame. That's exactly. That's the one we're going to fill in. Now, here it is. Let's see here. Get the reference, so it's going to be the high one. Remember what I said about using references? Well, we can use the original AJ to do just that. One of the nice things about doing this is you learn a lot. You get to learn a lot of things and you get to use it later on. There we go. One of the best ways of doing this is kind of getting as many references. And I'm talking about being off model here. That's the thing that's important here, is a matter of being off model. What I mean by being off model in the animation industry is when, say, like their face looks a little too long or it's too wide. Maybe they have an extra long, disproportionately long arm and it's not supposed to be. That's being off model. A good way of getting things set up is to have as many references at your disposal to keep things consistent. Now, that's what all of these over here are for. These are what we call guide layers. You can have various different types of guides, like there's a normal layer, guide layer, mask layer, masked, past tense layer. Those two are, they work together. They're synchronized with each other, but for the sake of this demonstration, that's outside of it. So I have for me an arc guide over here. I'll zoom in a little bit here. So I have a nice arc guide. I have, remember what I said about naming layers nicely? Yep. This one, here, I'll show it to you. This one, this guide layer here for me is just a matter of keeping the leg the same length, we'll say, so it's not too stretched. In animation, if you were, especially if you were at, I can't think of his name right off bat, the 3D animator. I'm going to kick myself for this. Who? Yeah, who was that? Yes. Who gave the demonstration on Friday? That was Argo. Okay, it was. Thought it was. Anyway, what Argo Damon said was something along the lines of, in animation, you want to over-exaggerate things. That is very true. And this is no exception here. However, depending on what they're doing and how much you want to exaggerate it is an even better question. That's what this layer is all about right here, is just keeping the size of her hoof, her arm, we'll say, about, it's a good guide for me. Now this other layer, this one is the actual drawing guide. This is what we will be using to help us guide things along. Now, the nice thing in Flash, I'm not sure about 3D animation, and in fact, that's about all I'm going to speak about it. But the nice thing about Flash is sometimes you can use you can use a symbol continuously, meaning you don't have to modify it once it's done, or sometimes you can. The hoof here would be a great example of this. So for instance, here is our hoofs layer. That's that, and yes, that's a very common thing is don't name your layers, and to be fair, naming layers can be tricky because if I were to call it like hoof or hoof edge or something, I might be using that layer later for a different hoof symbol that might not actually have it, or if I do, I have to take it out of order. But let's bring the hoof over, and let's bring the hoof's edge over. All we need to do now on this one is just simply position it, which is what our handy guide gave us. Get it about right here. And we'll do that too. Why not? So now comes the fun part. Oop. I just love it when you do that. My apologies, folks. Trying to copy layers over sometimes does that. Back where I want you. And we'll move this over. Okay. So now comes the fun part, like I said. Actually working with the arm. Now, as the arm sits, we can't really do much with it. But if you haven't noticed, every time we tunneled into a symbol, that's where we go from, say, the main timeline into a symbol, and then maybe into another symbol. That's what's known as tunneling into the symbol. When we tunnel into the symbol, you'll notice it has its own timeline, right? Well, and I was apparently supposed to delete that one. Well, it has its own timeline. So you can work multiple timelines in Flash/Animate. And that's really powerful because you can have things actually happen, say, at this time versus at a different time, if that makes any sense. So let's go ahead and animate this. Now the nice thing is of course having it dimmed out like this, it's called the anti-alias feature. The nice thing about it is you can tell when you're tunneled in. We're going to work on using our guides to our advantage. So to do that, we're going to use the rectangle tool. We need to set a few things here. First of all, we need to get the right colors. So let's go ahead and get those colors set. Perfect. Then simply draw our rectangle. And we need to switch the colors around. You spend about a good chunk of your time fighting things. All right. Now, first, we're going to clear away these two. We're going to clear away those two lines. We don't need them. The other thing you'll probably notice is the line thickness. We're going to have to change that. So let's select our lines. Now, most pony puppets that you're going to get, if you go online and download them from, say, DeviantArt, for instance, most of those, excuse me, most of those are going to be anywhere between 3 to 5 lines thickness, and I believe this puppet specifically requires level 5. So we're going to do that. We'll start there. If we have to adjust, we can. And we'll be adjusting things here anyway when we get to the end. And all we got to do now, simply start positioning things. We're definitely going to be editing things here in a moment. Our hoof is about right here. Start bending the lines. Here's the hoof. Get it about here. Yes. Very good. So now we need to test it. Back out. We will set it to 31. Remember what I said about image symbols? You can move them. Over here in this looping part of it, this is where you can have your options. If you have it set to just single frame, it's just that. So this is often what you're going to use for the innermost symbols, like the hoof or their arms, their tails. You only need one single image. Especially if you're going to be using the same symbol for different parts, say like the tail when they're at their side versus their tail when they're facing you, the front view, you might do that. This is where a single frame comes in handy. However, if you're working with, say, an image symbol like a puppet, and you want them to actually do the actions that you want them to do when animating it, this is where you're going to want to use loop or play once. The loop in particular can act a lot like a makeshift movie symbol. Since this is the arm and we're already animating it here, we're only going to worry about just a single frame. Now all we got to do, set it to 31, and let's remove these guides. Okay, so clearly we can see we have a little work to do still. It's not completely aligned. It looks off, right? So let's go ahead and start modifying that. Now without the guides, since the guides already gave us the positioning, we just need to do the fine-tuning. In order to do said fine-tuning, we now need to convert these lines into shapes. As they sit, they're basically just very, very, very tiny rectangles. And that's all we got to do. Modify, shape, convert lines to fills, voila. And utilizing our anti-alias setting for tunneling into symbols, let's begin. What I do is just line the sides up. Another thing that's a real bother is, here, I'll just show you. These are what we call anchor points. Now the thing about Flash is it loves to make a lot of anchor points. So it can get really frustrating when you're trying to move things and these anchor points get really finicky with you. All right. Let's go here, line this up, kind of fill things in a little bit. I think we'll move this back just to get a little bit more space. Okay, so let's check this. Good, the hoof, the end of the hoof right here looks good. But anyone who's watched the show knows, well, here, let's just take a look at AJ's ear here. They always end at a point, right? So, if we want to finish this hoof off, the leg off, we got to make a finer point, right? Well, lucky for us, that's just a little extra step. Let's begin. First, let's get the shapes lined up. And then we're going to need to create another little anchor point. We'll do it it's usually about a 1/6 or a 1/5 of the way in, give or take. We'll do that, create a nice anchor point there. We'll bring the last one here, this one, we'll bring it down. And there we go. It's kind of already nice as it is. But They're a little bit finer than that. They're just a pinch finer than that. So let's tune this a little bit more. And this is where I would normally start yelling at things. There. That looks good. Now, just got to finish it off. About right here. About right here. All right, so you're going to play that game, Flash? We'll play that game. Let's go ahead. Bring this back here. About right here, we'll pull one out. Actually, kind of a nice demonstration for you guys. Just got to pull it out a little more and fine-tune the curve. One thing I will tell you right off the bat, if you're going to be doing this, make sure your anchor points, make sure there's some smoothness between the lines. Unless you absolutely need jagged edges, it's very important that you have some smoothness to your lines.
Sounds like the anchor points will lead to some anger points if you're not careful, right?
That's about it, MrBen. You got that one right. Okay, I think we'll call that one good. Let's just take a look. Yes? It's possible. Flash does have a rather, or if anything, it did have a widespread use. But I know a lot of studios are kind of it's becoming a bit depreciated. There are things like Toon Boom Harmony or Open Tunes. I know maybe someone was going to ask what other animations are out there. And I'll go into a little more detail about this later. But there are other animating softwares out there. And Flash, and I should say Animate now, I hear nothing but a love-hate relationship with it in the animation industry. But let's finish the demonstration off. And as we can see, we have our missing frame is complete. Now, to prove it, we need to bring her to life. Don't you dare say anything.
I wasn't going to. Tempted, but I wasn't going to.
For those of you who don't know, this is MrBen. He's basically my one of my best friends, and he made the effort to come from about, I'll leave that to him to decide.
St. Louis, Missouri.
From St. Louis, Missouri, all the way up here. And it was a complete and utter shock to me. So I had no previous knowledge of it whatsoever. All of a sudden, here he shows up Friday night in the game hall while I'm there, and to say I was blindsided was an understatement.
Well, like I said a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't lying. I was coming up to visit a friend who wasn't expecting me, so.
I still say you were referring to someone else. But
I just suddenly imagine Rainbow Dash coming up and saying, I think I'm seeing double here.
Pinky. Now, if we wanted to make it more of a loop, we could do that. I just basically I could either extend the frames out ad infinitum or just make it a movie clip or something, but I don't think we'll do it. I think you guys kind of got the point. So, with that, I'm going to turn things over to you fine folk. I'm going to ask if you guys have any questions. Curse these sources. There we go. So yes. Does anyone have any questions about anything related to the demonstration, for me, for anything? Yes? Good question. Typically when it comes to, and we'll pretend I have a voice, someone providing some voice. What you can do, and I wish I had any right off the bat, I don't know if I really want to start digging in any files here, but audio in Flash works the very same way as you would any object. Not necessarily a symbol, but say like an image or yes, a symbol. What I would do is I would import said audio into the library, which is what we have here. I know I didn't go over this with you guys, and I'm kind of sorry about that. If you ask about it, I'll show you. But I would import the sound in, and I would give it its own layer. That's usually a good idea, to give your audio its own layer. But I would give it its own layer, and it would play whatever it would, a music piece, a voice, whatever you might want, it will play. Now, as a suggestion, typically speaking, you don't want to have audio really embedded in Flash. The exporting process really wrecks with it. If you have any kind of video editing software, Vegas, Premiere Pro, or even something like, what was that? What's that free one?
Camtasia?
Yes. Something like that. That's where I would suggest you add audio in for the final product. You do need to add audio into Flash for a reference. But after that, I would highly recommend you put the audio in your video editing software and export it there. That's going to get you the best results. With that, there is no difference between them in terms of function and in terms of it being owned by the same company, Adobe. But Flash was just essentially the older model of it. What ended up happening is as the internet itself, in terms of the way it's run, is moving away from Flash-based setup, a Flash-based setup, into what's known as HTML5. The whole Flash itself, the word, is becoming a depreciated. It's becoming a depreciated term, we'll say. However, in terms of actually animating things, this is still a function. It's still viable. So what they did was just change the name to animate. This is an older PC of mine, an old laptop. I recently just bought a new desktop, and that's what I work on. But I'm not going to be dragging that beast here. That's not under the circumstances. But anyway, I just happen to have Flash on this one. I do use Animate on the new one. So it's just a matter of essentially just what time you're in. Any other questions? Ben?
When you was asking about the pre-program, was you asking like video, or was you asking more like audio?
Both.
Because if you're looking for audio, I would suggest using Audacity as well.
Audacity is a good one for free sound mixing or anything.
That's all I wanted to say.
No, okay, appreciate it. Any other questions while we're here? I am not. This is completely fan-made. This is 100% my hobby. Yep, I do have a YouTube channel. I stream on Twitch. Yeah, kind of an odd place, I know, but the reason I stream on Twitch is partially because of the community things you can do. I know there's Picardo TV as well, and I have thought about it, but I'll answer your question here in a moment. I haven't forgotten it. I have a YouTube channel, which is where I upload the finished products. Let's see, it should be Everlasting Joy. If not, it's Joyous Production 77. If you just search Flash Sentry Waifu Thief, you should be able to find it. That's my latest one, and subtle promotion here. I stream my work in progresses on my Twitch channel. I do that because it's a great community, and I already kind of had some things set up. I also stream games on there from time to time, on Fridays in particular. But in terms of the actual animation itself, I got started in this. Do you want the short version or the long version? Short? Okay. So the short version is that about summer of 2015, I was working up around East Bethel in Minnesota here. And I was working for a company called the Cedar Creek Ecosystem Science Reserve. It's an annex of the University of Minnesota. I was working as an intern. And we lived there. My hometown is about 20 minutes away from the Iowa border and at the time that's where I was still staying. I'm trying to move up here. But anyway, when I got done there, and through a lot of backstory that I gave you the option to skip, one of the things I wanted to do in my spare time was, do something. So I thought, well, Adobe Flash at the time was the only major Adobe product I had not used. I had done nothing with it. I didn't know how to use it. So I said to myself, you know what? For this summer, that's what I'm going to do, darn it. I'm going to learn how to use Adobe Flash. And I also said to myself, you will be making at least one animation to upload to YouTube for the world to see. And that's kind of the short version of it there. I learned throughout the whole summer there how to use it. I eventually made my first project, Modification. It's an early old video that definitely shows its age. But I'm still proud of it. And from there, the rest is history. I'm just that crazy. Yes, in the back. Joyous Productions 77, or just search everlasting_joy. Again, even simpler, if you just search Flash Century Waifu Thief, you'll find it. That's mine. We still got about 20 minutes, so if there are any questions, and if not, we can always end early too. Yes, Ben?
Have you considered utilizing other programs like Source Filmmaker or I don't think Two Moon would really be available for public consumption or anything like that.
There is a limited version of it that is public consumable. And before I answer that question, I'll go to a much broader question, or go back to the more general question. Bear in mind that, again, this was 2015, and I wasn't aware of a lot of other different programs at that time for animating things. And so I thought that Flash, between that and the fact that the horsies were made in Adobe Flash, then animate, I thought, well, just use the source, right? But as time's gone on and things have unraveled between things like, I'm sure some of you might be aware of Adobe's take on using older models, right? For those of you who don't know, Adobe released a tweet about a month or so ago, something saying like they want to make it illegal to use older versions of any of their products. Why? I don't know. Money, dear boy. Anyway, so the thing to note, though, that you would say, well, shouldn't I be running away really, really fast from them then? And the answer should be yes. There's a catch to it. Two of them, I should say. Price and time. If some of you might have just walked in, I know, but something to note is making animations takes time. Unlike, say, drawing or making videos like pony music videos or something, which if you do that, I'm not knocking you. I'm not trying to knock you. I'm bless you, okay? But they take time. Animating takes a lot more than that, at least 100 times more, because you're essentially drawing one frame Then you're drawing the next. There's a reason the timeline is the way it is because here's frame 45, what we call frame 45. That's one drawing. Frame 46, that's another drawing. Frame 47, that's another drawing. 48, another drawing. 49, another drawing. Each one of these is its own drawing. Now, when it comes to the time aspect of things, that would mean having to relearn an entirely new program, which would mean taking possibly months off just to relearn a new program. Now, thankfully, in terms of some of the mechanics, they're already given, but not all mechanics are. Now, I'm fortunately, I'm going to stress it again, fortunately, in a good position to answer your question, MrBen, because right now, as you know, I'm working on just a solo video project. And I have started to think about that. I know I said what I said a long time ago when starting up, that no, I'm just going to stick with Flash, but to be quite honest with you, I have started to consider some other options. And some of those options to consider are, I've considered three. There's OpenTunes, which is a free software. That one is publicly available. The only thing is the interface there. I've only done one test, so I know that's not fair to it. But the one test I've done was kind of weird. I'm not, more exploration is needed there. You do have, of course, the other big professional gargantuan that is Toon Boom Harmony. Everyone probably aware the My Little Pony movie was made with Toon Boom Harmony. Thing is, though, is that animation software itself, if it's paid, ain't cheap. It is not cheap, and I'm not even going to begin to give you the price tag because I don't want everyone to give a collective gasp here, but there is a limit.
Arm and a leg in your firstborn child?
Let's go with that. Arm and a leg in your firstborn child. Now, Toon Boom, there is a limited edition for public consumption. That is a possibility. So if you wanted to do stuff there, you could. But as its name implies, it's limited. So it's kind of one of those you get what you pay for things. The other thing to consider is that is nice about Adobe is the fact that they're an entire multimedia family of software. So if you have Flash, you can also have their video editing software, Premiere Pro, and After Effects for just that, any After Effects. This is all bundled together. Toon Boom Harmony, on the other hand, that's one software. So you now have to get the video editing software at minimum and anything else as separate packages. Yes?
And exactly how resource intensive is this on your systems?
You're kind of asking two questions there. Here, it's actually not as bad as you might think. Previewing, if we export the movie, and I'm just doing it to show you, to give you an idea here, the SWIF itself, which is the exported video that we played here, is only showing about 323.1 kilobytes of software. Now, when it comes to the actual animations themselves, like Flash Sentry Waifuthi, for instance, that gets a little bit more intensive. Again, because we have to think between each frame a picture and, of course, what resources I'm using. Say, this would be a very simple scene, but this would be a more complicated scene because of all the number of symbols in there. This is where you're going to start getting a bit resource intensive. Now, when it comes to your computer itself, that's the second question, because being an older laptop here, it's going to take some time. That's going to take resources. That's going to be chewing into limited resources. My PC at home, on the other hand, that thing's a monster, and it can take it. And for the record, no, you don't need a good computer. If you're going to do this, a good computer is a good thing. A better computer is even better. But even if you are on a bit of a budget and you still want to do this, you still have the option of working on this even with an older model. As I've demonstrated here, even my filled up ancient computer can still be just fine doing this. Question?
Do you ever wish you could be in any of the points or good life videos? Because I do.
Yeah, why not? I don't, I guess to be in it, yes. Let's just leave it at that. In terms of animating it, though, that'd be a different story. Question? I've had a lot of people, I've been fortunate to have a lot of people work with me on voices. I've had Webcake help me twice. I've had Brittany Ackerman or Brittany Pony. She's here actually, and if you find her, send her my way, please, because I want to track her down. And I'm still, that was one of the things I wanted to do on the first day was find her, and I still can't find her. Thank you, I appreciate it. I've had some other, say, more obscure VAs work with me. I've had this guy right here. He's Dr. Caballero in Flash Century Waifu Thief. He did a pretty darn good job of it, I must admit.
Provide a demonstration now, but I don't want to blow anyone's eardrums out. So
probably a good thing. But those are the people I've had. I'm more than willing. My DeviantArt profile is my main base of operation. So in terms of announcements, especially for voice acting casts, I will do Twitter as well, or at least I should. I should really get into that. That's where I send out announcements, and I'll say like, hey, I got an open spot for Bon Bon. I got an open spot for Twilight Sparkle, open spot for Dr. Caballero. And whoever wants to fill it, usually operate on a first come, first served basis. I've been fortunate enough that I've never had to turn anyone away. To some degree. Like if you're trying to, we don't care, Kaspersky. Yes and no. Like for instance, if I did manage to get multiple, say, Twilight Sparkle roles, I would have to pick one. But thankfully, what I'll do is, if there's a spot, if it's taken, then that's the end of it. Twilight Sparkle's taken. But if there was another role they wanted to fill, then yeah, all they got to do is audition. And I say audition just in the sense of I just got to know is all. If you don't audition for me, I don't know. I'm not going to know. Yes.
If I may just go ahead and provide a little what I did when I did Dr. Caballero for him was I actually recorded my voice in a WAV file. I didn't come through that. So that's what it was. That's how you want it. That's how you
Yep. Yeah, that's all you got to do is just send me a voice sample of whatever the role it is I might have, and I'm not too picky. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you still have questions, feel free to hunt me down. I'm more than happy to speak, and I'm also happy to listen. That's something that I've been a bit disturbed by being here is, why does no one want to talk? But feel free to hunt me down. Feel free to say something, and if you have any questions on this, or just want to shoot the breeze, I'm more than happy to. And I just want to say to everyone before you leave there, and for those who have left, you can leave. I just want you to hear this is all. Thank you everyone for showing up, because this running concurrent with the guest of honor panel, it really says something that you're here, and I really appreciate it. So, thank you.
A little bit of promotion on this, but this Twitch channel is everlasting joy. And like he mentioned, he streams Fridays and Sundays thus far. He's
Fridays and Sundays. Friday's my game stream. Sunday is the media stream. So Flash video, or I'm sorry, what?
What time? I forgot.
Friday is always variable because of work.
Okay.
but it's usually around, and it's probably going to change here. At this moment, it's still about 3 o'clock Central Standard Time till about 5:30. But it might be instead 4 Central Standard Time. But Sunday, that one's a little bit more stable. That one is 3 o'clock Central Standard Time. No, Twitch would be more like Ustream or YouTube, like a stream, YouTube streaming or anything. It's not like Twitter. Yes.
No, Twitter's basically just like it's not like a broadcast. You're basically announcing short messages.
Microblog.
Yeah, microblog.
Mm-hmm. Still in the born and raised here, from, like I said, from the south end of the state, about 20 minutes from the Iowa border, and trying to move up here. Where I'm from is, I'm not going to give that away. I don't want to because it's that small a town, but I'm trying to move up here for better job opportunities. It would have to depend on my schedule, and let me tell you about my schedule. Get up at about 6:30, do everything, and by the time I have any free time to myself, it's about 10 o'clock. Would I be open to private lessons on this? Yeah, maybe someday. But that would be, kind of one of those, it'd be one of those far future things. Cool. Mm-hmm. We got about 5 minutes, so I'll take, if there's any one last question, I'll take it. No? All right. Well, again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.